All right, we're down to a new letter and the final letter to the Thessalonians. This will be Second Thessalonians 1 1 through 12. And I'm super pumped about starting another book. And we kind of pick up where we left off on First Thessalonians because there is a lot of good news for the Thessalonian believers that they are doing a good work. Two things that point to this is one, uh, Paul says that their faith is flourishing and the love for one another is increasing. And what's really cool is about that wording, it's like an abounding beyond abounding, like it's like super abounding in their love. So they're doing a pretty darn good job of doing the thing that Paul told them to do in the first part, along with Sylvanus or Silas and then Timothy. He just basically says, y'all, like, we're boasting about you to other churches. Now, when he says boast, what's really cool about that word is it means to glory in, which I find very significant because basically there's this whole concept of the church's glory and God's glory. And so God's glory is seen through the church, and then our glory is seen through Christ because we know our ultimate glory will be when we see him face to face and when we will be glorified. But the way we know that we're on that trajectory is that we're glorifying God right now and how we live. So again, you got the sanctification and the glorification. They both go hand in hand in glorifying God. I hope that made sense. So, but what's the pull and push for these believers in Thessalonica is that they are counted worthy of the kingdom. And it's not because of anything they've done. God has already done that. And so I just want to make very clear, like, when you communicate with students, like, they are suffering, and that is evidence that they are counted as worthy of the kingdom. So that's the biggest thing I want us to remember is in verse 5 where it says it's clear evidence of God's righteous judgment that you will be counted worthy of God's kingdom. So suffering and the perseverance that they are continuing in, the endurance, that is evidence, not the actual heart, but it is evidence of why they will be counted worthy of the kingdom of God, and they are worthy of the kingdom of God. And then basically we have a distinction built. I will bring up two passages this week, one from Matthew 25 when Jesus separates the goats from the sheep. In Isaiah 66, we see that God uses Isaiah to prophesy about separation of those who are righteous and those who are non-righteous, those who are wise and those who are foolish. That's all throughout the Bible. But what's really cool is this passage makes very clear once again that those who are the oppressors or those who afflict, they will receive repayment. They'll have to repay for their sins. And it brings up the topic of hell. It talks about eternal destruction. One thing to know about the topic of eternal destruction, it's always a misconception that some people in theological circles will say that it's talking about annihilationism, which is basically saying like you cease to exist and that's your punishment, and that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about the duration of the time period of a eternal destruction means that it's never ending. So it isn't something that just comes to an end. No, it's never ending. It's eternal torment. It's not good. And so that's the thing that he brings up to those who oppress. And he says he will take vengeance with flaming fire to those who don't know the gospel or don't know God, and those who don't obey the gospel. So whether you say, well, I don't know God, well, that's not going to be good enough because like creation itself is reflecting its creator. And so we can't say we didn't know enough because we have the evidence and we choose to oppress that evidence. So that's how we are an oppressor in a lot of ways of God and his kingdom. But then we also can't say that we didn't know enough and then reject. I think this may be a slight a little bit the Gentiles who say they don't know God and they're worshiping other gods, and then also the Jewish people that did have a lot of the knowledge and where Jesus continued to prophesy and preach to them, but guess what they did? They rejected him. So that's very much the warning that's given, but it's also an encouragement to the believer that, hey, you will receive relief one day. It's just not going to be right now. The ultimate relief in being in heaven. And then finally, we get to how God will make you worthy of his calling. It's going to be the devotion and duty that he will provide for you by his strength so that you will continue in faith. And so that's what the people of Thessalonica needed to hear. The Christians there, they needed to hear that there is hope, there is relief, and then God's going to do the work in you. He's going to continue doing what he's always done. He's going to give you the devotion and the desire. And I'm really going to hit home on that. Like, does the believer have devotion and desire? And I would answer that with a yes. Paul focuses very heavily on the devotional aspect, the desire, the passion. You can tell when people are passionate about something when they're not passionate about something. But there are some things in life we have to do. But when it comes to our relationship with Jesus, there should be a passion and there should be this sense of duty. And that is what was describing the people in their relationships with others. They were faithful, they were flourishing in that, and then their love for one another was a reflection of their love of God. And then the big thing we want to warn students who are not believers, who will be there Sunday night, is the dangers of hell, the dangers of rejecting God, and the dangers of claiming ignorance. So this Sunday night will be a little bit of a heavier message on that part, but it will also, like, Christians don't get off the hook. They have to answer to the warning as well, because then we've got to say, do we want that even for our worst enemy? And the answer is no. We want them to know Jesus so that they will not be afflicted forever by a wrathful God. And so I pray that this will be encouraging to you. Take your time with this passage this week. Be ready to discuss. We'll see you Sunday.